Harriet, I think you should spend only 15 minutes with the Martins before I come to fetch you. This is only appropriate for a polite meeting.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I've missed all of you.
Oh, Harriet, don't you remember the day when we measured your height on that wall? How you must have grown since then.
Why, of course. We had such fun that day with Robert.
Harriet, we must be going. It has been a pleasure to see all of you.
Oh, that poor Harriet is being dragged around by that evil Emma. Emma did not give us much time to talk with Harriet before she dragged her away.
I do hope you enjoyed the Martins, but we must make sure to maintain relationships only in our social class. Do you understand, Harriet?
I understand, Emma, but I do wish that I could enjoy time with the Martins more often. If only they were in a higher social class. If only Robert was in a higher social class.
Oh, poor Harriet. I know what will cheer us up. We must go visit the Westons. Oh, the Westons are not at their house. I will just go back home.
How are you? Frank Churchill comes tomorrow.
We better move on, Mr. Weston. We are detaining the girls.
Well, I am ready. Emma, you must not be expecting such a very fine young man. You only have my account. I dare say he is really nothing extraordinary.
Think of me tomorrow, dear Emma, about 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock, depend upon it. He will be here by 3.
When will Frank Churchill be here?
He arrived already. Mr. Weston will be bringing him over soon.
Hi Emma, this is Frank Churchill.
It is very nice to finally meet you, Frank.
Hello Emma, how do you do? I really love my new stepmother. She is quite young and quite pretty. Elegant, agreeable manners. I was prepared for, but I confess that considering everything, I had not expected more than a well-looking woman of a certain age.
You cannot see too much perfection in Mrs. Weston for my feelings. Were you to guess her to be 18, I should listen with pleasure, but she would be ready to quarrel with you for such. Don't let her imagine that you have spoken of her as a pretty young woman.
I would really like to go see an old friend, a neighbor of yours. I know her from Weymouth. Her name is Jane Fairfax.
You are acquainted with Miss Jane Fairfax, sir, are you? She is staying here on a visit to her grandmama and aunt. They will be glad to see you. One of my servants shall go with you.
My dear, my father can direct me.
Your father's not going so far. He is only going to the Crown. There are many houses you might be very much at a loss, but my coachman can tell you where to best cross the street.
Be cautious of Miss Fairfax's aunt. She will talk your ear off, if you let her. Mr. Churchill is so young. And so handsome. I hope to marry him one day. Oh, if only.
Marriage is the greatest evil I can think of. It takes people from me.
Hello Emma, I wanted to get my daily exercise, and when I suggested a walk, Frank decided to come along. He did not doubt that there would be pleasant walks in every direction, but if I left the decision to him, he would always choose the same. Highbury, that airy, cheerful, happy-looking Highbury would be his constant choice.
I'm very glad that you two came. Would you like to see the house?
I would love to be shown the house by you, Miss Woodhouse. This is a very nice estate. I love the bridge. I would love to see your whole neighborhood. And I do very much enjoy speaking with you, Miss Emma. I have found that we have much in common.
I, also, have enjoyed this time together, Mr. Churchill. Are there any other places or people you would like to visit while you are here?
I would love to visit my father's home, which was also the home of my father's father. I recall a woman who had nursed me while I was young. I believe she is still in that house.
Then we shall walk the neighborhood until we find this house. We have arrived at the Crown Inn. I do wish we could visit the old ballroom or the horses.
Dear Emma, I do wish you would let me take you for this dance. Oh, please, Miss Emma.
I am rather surprised to see the constitution of the Westons prevail so decidedly against the habits of the Churchills. You seem to have all the life, spirit, cheerful feelings, and social inclinations of your father, and nothing of the pride or reserve of Imscombe. So yes, I will dance with you.
Oh, let's move to the front of the crown now.
Oh. Look, it's the Bates house. Did you get to pay your visit yesterday?
Yes. Oh yes. And was just going to mention it. A very successful visit. I saw all three of the ladies. I felt very much obliged to you for your puppetery hint. If the talking aunt had taken me quite by surprise, it must have been the death of me. As it was, I was only betrayed into paying a most unreasonable visit. 10 minutes would have been all it was, an accessory, perhaps all that was proper. And I had told my father I should certainly be at home before him. But there was getting away no pause. To my astonishment, I found when he joined me there at last, that I had been actually sitting with them very nearly 3/4 of an hour. The good lady had not given me possibility of escape before.
And how do you think Miss Fairfax looking?
Ill, very ill, that is if a young lady can never be allowed to look ill. But the expression is hardly admissible, Mrs. Weston, is it? Ladies can never look ill. And seriously, Miss Fairfax is naturally so pale as almost always to give the appearance of ill health. A most deplorable want of complexion.
It was certainly never brilliant, but she would not allow it to have a sickly hue in general, and there was a softness and delicacy in her skin that gave a peculiar elegance to the character of her face.
Nothing can make amends for the want of the fine glow of health. Where features were indifferent, a fine complexion gave beauty to them all, and where they were good the effect was.
Well, there is no disputing about taste. At least you admire her, except her complexion.
I cannot spare of Miss Fairfax and her complexion.
Did you see her often at Weymouth? Were you often in the same society?
Ha! This must be the very shop that everybody attends every day of their lives, as my father informs me. He comes to Highbury, he says, 6 days out of the 7, and has always business at Ford's. If it be not inconvenient to you, pray let us go in, that I may prove myself to belong to the place, to be a true citizen of Highbury. I must buy something at Ford's. It will be taking out my freedom. I dare say they sell gloves.
Oh yes. Gloves and everything. I do admire your patriotism. You will be adored in Highbury. You were very popular before you came, because you were Mr. Weston's son, but lay out half a guinea at Ford's, and your popularity will stand upon your own virtues.
But I beg your pardon, Miss Woodhouse, you were speaking to me. You were saying something at the very moment of this burst of my repartee. Do not let me lose it. I assure you, the utmost stretch of public fame would not make me amends for the loss of any happiness in private life.
I merely asked whether you had known much of Miss Fairfax and her party at Weymouth.
And now that I understand your question, I must pronounce it to be a very unfair one. It is always a lady's right to decide on the degree of acquaintance. Miss Fairfax must already have given her account. I shall not commit myself by claiming more than she may choose to allow.
Upon my word. You answer as discreetly as she could do herself, but her account of everything leaves so much to be guessed. She is so very reserved, so very unwilling to give the least information about anybody, that I really think you may say what you like of your acquaintance with her.
May I indeed? Then I will speak the truth, and nothing suits me so well. I met her frequently at Weymouth. I had known the Campbells little in town, and at Weymouth we were very much in the same set. Colonel Campbell is a very agreeable man, and Mrs. Campbell a very friendly, warm-hearted woman. I like them all.
You know Miss Fairfax's situation in life, I conclude, what she is destined to be.
Yes. I believe I do.
You get upon delicate subjects, Emma. Remember that I am here. Mr. Churchill hardly knows what to say when you speak of Miss Fairfax's situation in life. I will move farther off.
I certainly do forget to think of her as having ever been anything but my friend and my dearest friend.
Did you ever hear that lady we were speaking of play?
Ever hear her? You forgot how much she belongs to Highbury. I have heard her every year of our lives since we both began. She plays charmingly.
You think so? I wanted the opinion of someone who could really judge. She appeared to me to play well, that is, with considerable taste, but I know nothing of the matter myself. I'm excessively fond of music, but without the smallest skill or right of judging of anybody's performance. I have been used to hear it admired, and I remember one proof of her being thought to play well. A man, a very musical man, and in love with another woman, engaged to her, on the point of marriage, would yet never ask that other woman to sit down to the instrument, if the lady could sit down instead, never seemed to like to hear one if he could hear the other. That I thought, in a man of known musical talent was some proof.
Proof, indeed. Mr. Dixon is a very musical man, is he? We shall know more about them all, in half an hour, from you, than Miss Fairfax would have vouchsafed in half a year.
Yes, Mr. Dixon and Miss Campbell were the persons, and I thought it a very strong proof.
Certainly very strong it was, to own the truth, a great deal stronger than, if I had been Miss Campbell, would have been at all agreeable to me. I could not excuse a man's having more music than love, more ear than eye, more acute sensibility to fine sounds than to my feelings. How did Miss Campbell appear to like it?
It was her very particular friend, you know.
Poor comfort. One would rather have a stranger preferred than one's very particular friend. With a stranger it might not recur again, but the misery of having a particular friend, always at hand, to do everything better than one does oneself. Poor Mrs. Dixon. Well, I am glad she has gone to settle in Ireland.
You're right. It is not very flattering to Miss Campbell, but she really did not seem to feel it.
So much the better, or so much the worse, I do not know which. But, be it sweetness or stupidity in her, quickness of friendship, or dullness of feeling, there is one person, I think, who must have felt it, Miss Fairfax herself. She must have felt the improper and dangerous distinction.
As to that, I do not.
Oh. Do not imagine that I expect an account of Miss Fairfax's sensations from you or from anybody else. They are known to no human being, I guess, but herself. But if she continued to play whenever she was asked by Mr. Dixon, one may guess what one chose.
There appeared such a perfectly good understanding among them all. However, it is impossible for me to say on what terms they really were, how it might all be behind the scenes. I can only say that there was smoothness. But you, who have known Miss Fairfax from a child, must be a better judge of her character, and how she is likely to conduct herself in critical situations, than I can be.
I have known her from a child, undoubtedly. We have been children and women together, and it is natural to suppose that we should be intimate, but we never were. I hardly know how it has happened, a little perhaps, from that wickedness on my side which was prone to take disgust towards a girl so idolized and so cried up as she always was, and then her reserve. I never could attach myself to anyone so completely reserved.
It is a most repulsive quality indeed. Oftentimes very convenient, no doubt, but never pleasing. There is safety in reserve, but no attraction. One cannot love a reserved person.
Not till the reserve ceases towards oneself, and then the attraction may be greater. But I must be in more want of a friend, or an agreeable companion, than I have yet been, to take the trouble of conquering anybody's reserve to procure one. Intimacy between Miss Fairfax and me is quite out of the question. I have no reason to think ill of her, not in their least, except that such extreme and perpetual cautiousness of word and manner, such dread of giving a distinct idea about anybody, is able to suggest suspicions of there being something to conceal. I feel that we are so well acquainted, I cannot believe it to be only our second meeting. You are not, as I expected, less of the spoiled child of fortune, more moderate and warmer.
Frank, you do not know what you are talking about. You are used to a large house, not a small one. You don't even realize how many advantages and accommodations are attached to size. Frank, it is time to leave.
Okay, goodbye Emma, until we meet again, for the third time.
I do not believe Mrs. Weston. Frank might not be aware of the inroads on domestic peace to be occasioned by no housekeeper's room or bad butler's pantry. But no doubt he did perfectly feel that income could not make him happy, and that whenever he were attached, he would willingly give up much of wealth to be allowed an early establishment.